The shot heard round the world. The air in the Roosevelt Room hung heavy with anticipation as former President Donald Trump prepared to drop what would become one of the most consequential economic bombshells of the decade. Flanked by steel-faced advisors and industry titans, the Mercurial leader leaned into the microphone and declared open season on foreign automakers with a sweeping 25% tariff that would send shockwaves through every corner of the global economy. This wasn't merely a policy adjustment, it was an economic declaration of war. A calculated strike at the heart of globalization itself. The anatomy of an economic earthquake of policies, brutal simplicity masked its tectonic implications. By slapping a 25% levy on every foreign-made vehicle and component, including parts destined for final assembly, American Trump had effectively erected a great wall of economic protectionism. The move carried the unmistakable whiff of 19th century mercantilism, yet was executed with 21st century political precision. Auto executives from Detroit to Tokyo scrambled to decode the fine print. The carrot, tax-deductible interest for loans on US-made vehicles. The stick, devastating cost increases for any automaker clinging to overseas production. Wildcard, cryptic exemptions for friendly nations like Mexico and Canada. Industry analysts immediately projected catastrophic ripple effects. A typical 30,000 import sedan would leap to 30,000 import sedan will do 37,500 overnight. Domestic vehicles using foreign components faced 5 to 15% price hikes. Supply chains woven across borders for decades now faced existential threats. The ghost of Ross Perot haunts the Oval Office. Trump's move didn't emerge from vacuum. It represented the explosive culmination of a populist rebellion that began when Ross Perot's charts first illustrated the giant sucking sound of jobs fleeing America during the 1992 debates. The former president had spent his adult life marinating in this economic nationalism. And now, with the polls tightening, he was executing his long-promised revenge against globalization's architects. Historical parallels abounded. 1930s Smoot-Hawley tariffs that deepened in the Great Depression, 1980s voluntary export restraints that birthed Japanese auto plants in America, 2018 steel tariffs that alienated allies while failing to revive mills. Yet this gambit was bolder, riskier, and more personal. A fact underscored when Trump took to Truth Social at 1:50 a.m. to threaten far larger tariffs against any nation daring to resist. The message was clear: this wasn't just policy, it was punishment. The dominoes began to fall within hours of the announcement. The global reaction revealed the stakes. In Stuttgart, BMW executives recalculated the viability of their Spartanburg SC plant while weighing retaliatory export taxes on American-made components. In Seoul, Hyundai accelerated plans to expand its Alabama facility even as South Korean trade ministers drafted WTO complaints. In Detroit, union halls erupted in cheers while Ford's accounting department quietly panicked over their Mexican supply chains. The policy's schizophrenia became apparent simultaneously. Protected UAW workers building F-150s, penalized Alabama technicians assembling imported Mercedes SUVs, paralyzed Tennessee factories dependent on German transmission. Economic theory behind the madness beneath the bluster lay a chillingly coherent if controversial economic vision. Trump's brain trust, led by trade advisor Robert Lighthizer, operated from core tenets: trade deficits as theft. Every imported Toyota represented wealth extraction, manufacturing as national security. Chip fabs and steel mills were 21st century battleships. Brute force works. Previous tariffs had forced minor concessions. These would demand surrender. They strategies. Intellectual godfather, economist Peter Navarro, before his fall from grace, had long argued that short-term pain would yield permanent gains as supply chains reshored. Critics countered with brutal math. The $12,000 price hike on a base Camry would erase 3 years of average wage gains. Retaliatory tariffs could devastate American farmers and tech exporters. Inflationary pressures might force the Fed to hike rates into a slowing economy. Human toll. Behind the headlines in the industrial Midwest, Reactions split along generational lines. Boiler room in Youngstown. Oh, grizzled steelworkers toasted with lukewarm beers. Recalling how an AFTA had shuddered. Finally, growled a UAW Local 1112 rep. Someone's got the balls to fight back. Tech startup in Ann Arbor. Me, a 28-year-old engineer, stared at her Tesla order confirmation. Now $8,000 more expensive. How does making EVs unaffordable help America lead? She tweeted to her 14 followers. Toyota dealership in Nashville. TNA single father blanched as his planned RAV for purchase now required dipping into college savings. The salesman shrugged. Maybe check out that new Ford no one wants. Epilogue. The inevitable backlash's Liberation Day dawned. The global chess pieces began moving. The EU activated a 10-point retaliation plan targeting bourbon and agriculture. Reshape quietly accelerated its China Plus One supply chain diversification. Street downgraded auto stocks, while shorting treasury bonds. Greatest threat wasn't foreign retaliation, but simple arithmetic. With 43% of American cars containing major imported components, 78% of consumers unwilling, able to absorb price hikes, 90% of economists predicting net job losses. The law of unintended consequences loomed large. Trump had promised an economic revolution, but like all revolutions, this one threatened to consume its children. Final judgment, genius or folly? The answer likely lies in the questions we can't yet answer. Will BMW build more U.S. plants or just raise prices? Will consumers patriotically buy domestic or keep driving old cars longer? Will inflation force Fed intervention, crashing Trump's re-election hopes? One truth emerges clearly in gambling: that America could bully its way to prosperity. Trump had set in motion forces even he might not control. The world would never trade the same way again. But whether that meant made in America renaissance or global recession remained the trillion-dollar question. Postscript. History's harsh lessons. The dust settles. Policymakers would do well to recall that the 1930s Smoot-Hawley tariffs slashed global trade by 66%, failed to save manufacturing jobs, helped spark a world war. The 21st century version was unfolding in real time, and the world was holding its breath.